Hi everyone, Richard here with another curriculum mapping with G Suite tutorial. If you've been following our community for a long time, it's likely you've had a go at this tutorial that is available via the infographic under the About section. And this was designed to make the process a bit easier, and a recent question popped up in the community about modifying the fields available to work with. And yes, absolutely, this is possible. The tutorial states that it's assuming your template request form is exactly in this order. And that's true for this particular case, but I think it's important that you have a good sense of how you can modify this aspect of this tutorial to strip out information or to add more information or just to modify it to your liking. And in order to do that, you have to have an understanding of how the back end is working in terms of the Google Apps Script, the formulas and functions that are all sort of happening at lightning speed behind the scenes. So I'm going to walk you through some of that so you can decide how you may want to modify this tutorial with your own data. So once you've made a copy of this sheet, you have something that looks like this, okay? And connected to that sheet is an app script. So if you go to Tools and Script Editor, and if you've done this, the first thing you would do is simply go in and, of course, replace the folder ID with your own folder ID. Piece of cake. So now, what's a little bit more complicated is aligning the data from your form response sheet that is issuing out the templates, in other words, the Autocrat Google Sheet, with the file cabinet Google Sheet. So I'm going to walk through this a little bit slowly just so you can kind of make sense of some of the components of this. So here we are in code.gs. Again, this is the script that's attached to the file cabinet view. Let me first explain the top part of this. The only thing you need to know about this is that this is responsible for the menu item, the custom menu in your file cabinet sheet. So when we look at it, we notice here next to help we have list files. This code right here is responsible for building this menu option, okay? That's all you need to remember about that. Let's go down to the next function. So here we have function connect Autocrat sheet. Now, before we can organize the data that we're going to import, we have to connect it. So you'll notice right away we're going to be inserting a sheet that we actually just delete. And this is really just sort of connecting the Google Sheets, getting them to talk to one another, to trust one another. I guess if you think of these sheets as people, we first have to get them to trust one another. So the whole purpose of this is really taking a URL that you would have submitted, because when you run this function, it's going to ask you to paste the URL of your Autocrat sheet. And it takes that information and stores it with this variable, and we can reuse it in this variable I've called formula. And then we create a sheet that's called delete me, and in cell A1 we set that value. So, and when we see this in real life, we're prompted to allow access, and that's all we really want after this. So once we allow access, we can go ahead and just manually delete the sheet. moving down to the function import autocrat sheet. This is very similar to the connect autocrat sheet. The only difference this time is we're actually going to organize the data that we import into the exact order that we want it to appear. And again, the only thing we want to keep in mind here is that we want to make sure in our query import range formula that the first column we display is the document ID. Now, the reason this is important is because this piece of data is our only piece of data that occurs in both the template request form. So we notice here on every requested template, we get a document ID. And in the file cabinet, when we run list my files, column B also gives us the document ID. So that piece of data will allow us to align all of these other bits of data that we want to include in the file cabinet. So just be sure that this is the column, the first one you put here is the column corresponding to the document ID. And then you can add any number of columns after that in any order that you like. So I hope that makes sense. All right. Now, we're going to continue scrolling down. In this section, the main highlight here are how we're populating rows 1 and 2 in the file cabinet view. You can see it says title, ID, URL, and then in row 2, hidden, hidden, hidden. This corresponds to the headers and then the filters required for the awesome table functionality. So all of that is automatically populated when you run the script. Now, if you've added extra data, you'll have to be sure to add into the script the fields that you want. So you can see here I've added, for example, subject area, grade level, start, end, course, and then even a space for the edit URL. And this lets me go back and edit the original form, so on and so forth. So these are kind of tacked on to the end, and you can keep adding more. Just follow the same sort of convention here inside a single parentheses, separated by a comma. Now, once you've finished adding those pieces, then it gets a little tricky. So a little bit further down in the script, this is around line 143, we have another formulas variable. And all we're doing with this is we are setting the value of specific cells to formulas. And this is performing that VLOOKUP that we talked about. So it's just going to place, in this case, there's 6 array formulas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you were importing more than 6 columns, you would need, for example, 7 array formulas. In other words, the number of array formulas has to correspond to the number of columns that you want to import into the file cabinet view. And these are all very similar array formulas. The only thing that's different is, for example, this index number, right? So this is referencing the second column from the document ID. Okay, so we know that in this import, we said we wanted to put the document ID in the first column which is column A, and we can look at that import. Here it is column A. So that next, when we put a 2 in there, that's this next column over. That's the subject area one. 3 would correspond to the grades for the course. 5, unit title. 6, the start. And this would be, 7 would be the G. We would be importing that. So all of that lines up right here. So just to repeat that, we are using a Google Apps script to set the value of the cells in row 3 within the range of S to X. Okay, and that's actually visible in the script. We can see it right here. So we're getting this range S3 to X, and then we're getting, the first thing we're doing is we're clearing that range, because this happens, we have to remember this script is going on every night. So we first have to clear it, and then we reset them each night. And that's what this is doing here. So it's taking our formulas and it's populating one array formula per column in columns S through X. So S3 to X3, and that corresponds to these items right here. And then the sort order, we're setting it to true. And what this does is it lists the oldest items on the top and the newest ones on the bottom. So I think that's enough information to get you started with sort of changing the way things are organized or importing different data into your file cabinet sheet. But that's the important concept, is making sure your document ID column ends up first in that import sheet. So this import sheet, when it's pulled in, it's going to list our document ID, and then everything else from that will just, you can order it however you like based on the column numbers you choose. So I hope that's enough. Please feel free to comment or ask further questions. I know it can be a little intimidating getting into the app script, but there is a logic behind it that's not too hard to follow. Thanks for watching. Bye.